We are going to go ahead and get started. We have about 20 attendees. I'm not sure where our third panelist is, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because I want to respect everybody's time. My name is Amy Barrett Daffin. I'm with CNT Publishing. Joining us today is Sara Trail from the Social Justice Sewing Academy and Carrie Kilmer from SoHo and Vogue Knitting Live. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce both of them. Carrie Kilmer runs the leader in craft publishing and DIY magazines, and they do books and digital publishing, and they also do Vogue Knitting Live. SoHo publishes and creates the most widely distributed and respected magazines, books, and booklet titles in knitting, crochet, quilting, drawing, and cartooning. In 2020, she took Vogue Knitting Live, a consumer conference that was face-to-face, virtual and monthly, and she really pushed her team to do something extraordinary. And I think in the time of COVID, it's been really wonderful. Carrie's been the CEO at SoHo for 3 years. Before that, she was a COO and publisher. And then she was a VP, managing director of West Broadway Distribution Services. And she has been a colleague and friend for over 15 years. And the reason that Carrie is on this panel is she has made a huge effort to change not only her organization, but through Vogue Knitting Live, her events to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And she's just got a lot of great information to share with us today. So welcome, Carrie.
Thank you.
Our other panelist is Sara Trail. And Sara Trail, she started sewing when she was 4. I met Sara at 13 when she published a book called Sew with Sara. And I think we even had an in-office workshop with Sara where my 11-year-old son, hey, Erica, I'll introduce you in 1 second, where my son Parker made pink pajama pants and showed everybody how to model them. And I think Sara has always wondered what was going to happen to Parker. She also did a great video called Cool Stuff to Sew with Sara. And she's just done a lot of wonderful stuff. And she's designed pattern collections with simplicity. And she's done backpacks and jackets and hoodies. She also went on to attend UC Berkeley and Harvard University. And I think 2017, you created the Trayvon Martin memory quilt. And that is what got her to found the Social Justice Sewing Academy. And Sara spends a lot of time, pre-COVID, she was visiting guilds and conducting workshops with underserved youth and educating them on social justice. So welcome, Sara.
Thank you.
And our third panelist, Erica Bunker, welcome. Erica Bunker is the editor and creative director of Erica Bunker, DIY Style, the Art of Cultivating a Stylish Wardrobe. I follow Erica on Instagram. If you don't, you should. Her clothes are like, oh, and then she had the most amazing shoes on the other day. Erica is a Birmingham, Alabama-based veteran blogger with over 10 years of experience and with a solid audience and a great presence across all social media. She is a self-taught seamstress, a burgeoning designer, a public speaker, a wardrobe stylist, and a consultant whose personal style motto is "Why buy it when you can make it," which I love. And Erica is a woman who believes in occasion-appropriate dressing instead of age-appropriate dressing. And I think that that's got to be my favorite quote so far. She's not afraid of celebrating her femininity, and she's a woman who has learned to become more and more body confident. And she's a woman that wants to make a statement without screaming, "Look at my outfit," more like, "I have on a gorgeous outfit, and yes, I made it." And she's inspired by trends without being led by them. So welcome, Erica. So thank you all for being here today. We are going to try to keep this to an hour, and we have a ton of questions. So What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each of you the same question. And then if you want to chime in or add on to something that someone else says, please do so. My role here is just to keep the conversation going. So I'm going to start with you, Erica. What does a diverse and inclusive industry look like to you?
Well, Amy, it looks like where like even in the ads and like sewing magazines and on the cover of commercial sewing patterns, you see people that look like you see people that represent your age and your size, and you just kind of see yourself in the industry. And even in sewing machine ads and like magazines such as Threads, you want to see people that look like you using the machinery. When you see like a $13,000 sewing machine, I would love to see somebody who looks like me standing behind that machine or with that machine. So it says to the store owners, hey, this is our clientele. These are our customers. So when someone who looks like me walks into like an independent store to look at a machine or to do a test run on a machine, that people, you know, won't be like counting your money like as you're walking through the door, and they'll think, well, hey, of course this person would buy a Janome Memory Craft 15,000. This is our customer base. So I think that once people become accustomed to seeing those images and everything, they will believe that these people actually sew, they craft, and this is our customer.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And how about you, Carrie?
I think an inclusive industry is one in which we represent everyone who partakes in the experience in the industry, where we're uplifting and supporting everyone from photographers to models to designers to authors, and one in which all feel included and feel that they belong.
Okay, wonderful. And Sarah, how about you?
I would definitely echo, both sentiments, not only visually, but I think also like the qualitative aspect of like when you go into a quilt store, like you might not see yourself reflected in staff, but like why in February are only African prints, prevalent in stores only in February, like those kind of things of like as buyers and suppliers of like thinking, beyond just, certain months or beyond, just Women's Month, like there should be, like content that's sold, obviously, and who's hired. I don't necessarily like seeing diversity on people's feeds only in the month of February, like that performative kind of allyship or performative, pseudo wokeness can often be even more off-putting than, just not doing it at all. But I'd say, in addition to diversity in terms of, ethnicity or, age, but I'd also say really cultivating a new industry that welcomes beginners without always putting the seniority, like 10 plus years experience as your leading, standpoint. Or like I think oftentimes art forms, craft forms, all sorts of industries, they definitely have a hierarchy of the longer you've been in here, the more revered you are. And so I think often as young people that, I'd like to encourage in the industry, entering your quilt and show, like, I know that it's like obviously that's the best thing show, but like also having space for like new people deserve to be honored and encouraged too. Because if it can only be those with 40 years experience who've had the privilege and time to work on a quilt for 3 years, then as a new beginner, you often feel, well, I don't have the luxury of time that oftentimes quilters, do have. So if I don't have that time and I'm doing this, just for fun, where can they find the space? And I say where they, like young people or like, just new people or people who might not be able to afford the luxury, batiks and ICAP fabrics or, whatever, but like those who might be using recycled material, those who are using donated fabric, where can we cultivate a space where regardless of age and really regardless of experience level, everyone's treated not only with dignity, but with encouragement, kindness, and often, some empathy.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, that's wonderful. So, what do you see as the future of the industry regarding inclusivity and diversity in, say, 5 years or 10 years? And I'm going to start with you first this time, Carrie.
So I think there is an immense amount of work still to do. And I think that there are a number of continual conversations to have. I don't think the industry in totality up to this point has done a tremendous job of being inclusive and expanding outside of our existing circles to make sure that everybody who is a part of this experience is, being uplifted and supported. So I think that some very, very important conversations are being had in the knitting industry, and particularly over the course of the past year and a half or so. Luckily, some very, brave people came to the forefront and started expressing and being, expressing their stories and being vulnerable and in the world in general, and through what we've experienced over the course of the past year and a half with the Black Lives Matter movement and conversations that we've been having in general. A lot of things are happening, but there is a lot more work to be done. And I think we've done a lot, but we have a long way to go. So.
Okay. All right. And then what about you, Erica?
First and foremost, we need to normalize having the conversation because that's where I'm seeing things go awry. It's like when you call out a company or a brand on lack of diversity and inclusivity, that it always boils down to, well, why do we have to talk about race? Why do we have to bring politics into this? This is sewing, this is crafting. It's supposed to be wonderful. But if everyone is not feeling like they're being fed from this, then there's a problem. And I think it begins with just being open to the conversation. Larger companies, who's sitting at the table, who's making the decisions on on the marketing, on what's going out. And it's things like that that need to start from the top and trickle down. And just even things as subtle as, well, not really subtle, but as going into like social media and groups on Facebook. Like when these conversations start, someone should be moderating these conversations and saying, hey, let this person speak. If they feel like they're not seeing something or they're not getting something and they want it to be brought to the attention of the business or the group or the community, then it should be a conversation that should be had. And that's the only way we're going to be able to move forward.
Okay. All right. And you, Sarah, where do you see it in 5 to 10 years?
I think often we talk about invitation, like how can we bring diversity and how can we bring young people and how can we bring, and I'd almost push back of the industry has such a strong subculture of white supremacy and racism. I'm almost let's tear the system down, not literally, but obviously figuratively, and reimagine the industry to what we want to see and then create those spaces. Because oftentimes I can't, harm begets harm. And if you have a problematic, quilt shop that has always been intentionally racist, and then they bring in some fabrics or they hire a person of color, that doesn't mean that the space is going to change. It just means that they've brought a face of diversity. So I think oftentimes, particularly quilt shows that have had a bunch of kids, I was really excited, let's get these kids to the quilt show, let's do it. But then in Tampa, it was really not a safe or brave space for them to even be in. So it's oftentimes it's not about bringing diversity to spaces that already institutionally exist with problems, but let's work on the problems, or let's move away and create a new space, problem free, because it has to be more intentional than just let's rebrand our social media and we internally haven't done any changing. I think they have to almost coincide of not just, not just bringing new faces to a space that's already intentionally has some work to dismantle.
Right. And I see that. I know as an organization, when we took a stand with Black Lives Matter, we had a lot of people cancel off our email list, a lot of people. And we got some really scathingly hard emails. And I read every single one and thanked them for their feedback. And let them, and cancel them off our email list. But I do know what you mean about people, what you said, Erica, people saying, it's crafts, let's all be nice. Let's just pretend it's not a problem. And what you're saying, Sara, about the institutional part of it. So I totally get that. So if we were to define diversity to set the framework, how would we do that? Like, what questions would we ask ourselves? And I'm going to start with you, Sara. How would we define it?
I'd say that, we'd go really specific. Are we talking about racial diversity? Are we talking about age diversity? Are we talking about socioeconomic status? And I think trying to just say, let's bring diversity to a workplace, like that's too vague. And when we talk about like fluff, academia jargon or whatever, I think it really needs to be intentional. Like, let's spend 1 month focusing on age diversity. How can we recruit younger people? Then we can spend another month kind of focusing on more, racial diversity, or on experience diversity, or on socioeconomic status diversity. And I think oftentimes people think of diversity and inclusion of like, people can't afford it, so let's just throw scholarships at them and say that we're now diverse, or like, let's have a sliding scale and like let poor people do it. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean that space is even a space that people might want to, like, from a marginalized background, might even want to join. So I think often when we think of diversity, we really have to be intentional with like what outcomes we're looking for, and then work backwards to like pinpoint specific things. And it's like, it's not just, about making it more affordable, because oftentimes the socioeconomic diversity that you might be wanting are really contingent upon the space being a space that people want to be a part of.
Okay. All right. So when the way that you're defining diversity is to look at it in terms of not just race, but age and socioeconomic, so that we're not just saying, oh, we've added 3 people of color, now we're diverse. You're saying that's obviously not the answer.
Right.
Erica, what would you say? How would you define diversity, and what kinds of things do we need to ask ourselves?
Well, also to piggyback off of what Sara said, I basically agree. There is a lot of ageism in the crafting community. Like when you think of like quilters, you think of older, middle-aged white women. And there are a lot of creatives that are younger and of many different diverse backgrounds. And also, socioeconomics does play a large part, because the ability to be a hobbyist and to sit at home and craft with no business intent is a luxury. And so that's also something to think about.
Okay. All right. Carrie?
Yeah, adding on to what both Erica and Sara said, I think, diversity is so broad range and scope. It's kind of representing the human race and all that we entail, and all that makes up our incredible communities. And so there's so many aspects to look at. There's sexual identity, there's size, there's age, there's, as Sara mentioned, experiences that we all come from. And so it's really just making sure that everybody within the community, I think, feels as if they're stepping into a place or opening up the pages of a book or a magazine and feel as if he or she or they belong. And so, we all have an inherent need, I think, and a want and a desire to belong. And through belonging, we grow, we learn, we are able to express ourselves comfortably. And in an industry in which we are all creative, and there's such a need to feel a comfort level, to be able to, to show off who we are and what we can do and what we can bring to the table, knowing that you belong is vital. And so we as an industry have to support that belonging in all ways.
Okay. All right. Did I ask all 3 of you that question? I did. Okay. So one of the things I want to ask each of you is what have you done specifically to try to, whether it's raise awareness around diversity and inclusivity on a personal level, on your business level, in the outreach you're doing with your nonprofit, what are you doing to try to raise awareness? And I'm going to start with Erica this time.
A couple of sewing friends, well, a lot of sewing friends and we created Black Makers Matter to just reach out into the community to just try to change the landscape of the crafting community. We reached out to like a lot of the sewing brands. We like to highlight makers of color, not only sewing makers, even though predominantly all of us are sewers. But we like to show just everyone who is just creative and just to let people know because that people of color do craft and do create. One of the things that I found when we were having conversations is that we didn't know that Black people crafted. And it's like, well, how could you not? And I mean, like you're on social media, you're on Instagram, you're on Facebook, you're on Pinterest. And that was like the greatest concern. So that was one of our major things is to show all of the wonderful creators in the community that everyone is just, so it's just so much vastness there, so much artistry. And so that was our main thing.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And how about you, Sara?
You know, in SGSA, I think it's kind of giving young people the opportunity to do something that they typically, you know, don't have the option to. In SGSA, we do a lot of workshops in places ranging from juvenile halls to parolee houses to jails to high schools to undergrads, and really just like a myriad of like places. So I think in bringing textile arts, you know, to communities that might not typically have access, it's really, you know, one with the intent of like, this is an art form that you may not have, you know, experienced, but know that it is here, you know, get a little like just a sample of it. But more importantly, I think kind of encouraging the opportunity to create, not only for creating, but create with a purpose, and the purpose obviously being like sharing a message or sharing an opinion. I think oftentimes in my experience, and I went to private school, you know, like they taught art for the technique. They didn't teach art with like the intent to share something. You know, it was like, make something, give it to your mom, the end, you know, or your dad, or, you know, whoever. So I think in SGSA, our like theory of change and like our methodology and really our framework, that's like obviously critical conscious inducing, but really how can research informed art, you know, change hearts, change minds, and hopefully, you know, spur people to action, whether they just do something as small as like reposting, you know, bring awareness to their network, action as big as donating, action as big as, you know, caring more about the population. Sometimes the action can just be empathy. You know, sometimes issues that young people are facing in Chicago, you know, people in Oklahoma aren't aware of because, you know, that's not their lived experience, nor is it communities that they're in touch with. I think art can really be a silent dialogue across a lot of communities, even as, you know, small as seeing the exhibit, going to an exhibit. So I really think kind of like that intergenerational collaboration between quilters and young people, particularly flipping the dichotomy of like, typically if kids are going to a class, the teacher is going to be older, the teacher is going to be experienced, the teacher is going to be leading it. But in SGSA, it's really like young people are leading the art, leading the process. They're the ones giving instructions or like, you know, could you do, you know, to the more experienced. I think sometimes flipping the dichotomy on who gets to be the teacher in all positions, who gets to be, you know, like sometimes the kids are oftentimes teaching the volunteer. And when it comes to technique, obviously it's reversed. But, you know, just kind of understanding that like when and where you enter, you know, all people have something to share. It's just about who's listening, who has a microphone, and who's being told to like the banking model, who's doing the teaching versus who's doing the depositing. You know, like kids are typically being deposited into and adults are doing the depositing, but oftentimes in SGSA workshops or, you know, like in sharing the art and that collaboration process, you know, the adults are getting deposited into from the kids. So even something as small as flipping the dynamic, you know, can be a learning process on both ends.
I think so too. And Carrie, you've done a lot of really interesting stuff, especially with your with Vogue Knitting Live. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So we formed in 2019 a diversity advisory council with 8 incredible people that I'm beyond honored to know and work with. And so they have been instrumental in helping us to really start to move our industry forward in you know, and our organization specifically in terms of making sure that we're doing all that we can and continue to, have the hard conversations and looking at what we're doing to move forward, to amplify and celebrate everyone in our industry. So, it's a work in progress. But we have started Launchpad, which is a small business training, mentoring support program for businesses with the industry, and we specifically geared the program towards Black members of the community, but it's open to all. We founded a kaleidoscope fashion show to help support those who have not typically, Sara, as you had mentioned earlier, kind of had the experience or the opportunity to be seen, to make sure that they're out there in a big way in our organization. We have Diversity and Advisory Council panel discussions at almost every single one of our events in one form or another. So we're, continuously making sure that we're having these conversations and trying to create safe spaces. So, these are hard things for people to talk about. It's things that people tend to often be nervous to talk about. But as you said, Erica, it's so important. It's vital that people are able to have these conversations, and it's okay not to know. It's okay to be ignorant at times, as long as you're willing to hear and listen and be empathetic and do the research and then act on the research. We've tried to create more safe spaces for people who are differently abled, whatever their specific needs are. So, lots of different things that we've done and are continuing to work on. And again, I cannot thank enough the members of the Diversity Advisory Council who've been working with us to move what we're doing forward, because there was no way that we could have done what we've done or have the conscientiousness that we have if it was not to broaden our circle. And that's really what we needed to do. We needed to kind of stretch outside of our existing industry and our existing internal circles to start talking to other people and learning from other people's experiences. And then also on the magazine end of our business, we just appointed a new editor-in-chief, and we're doing a lot to try and also make the magazine itself feel more supportive of our industry and more inclusive of our industry. And we are working with, a much broader network of teachers and designers and photographers. And also, for the first time in our magazine, we are increasing the sizes of the patterns in the magazine to make sure that we're being more size inclusive. So
that's great. We got a question, and I think that this is something that people think about and they don't ask. So I really appreciate Bob asking this question. And he said, as a quilt show organizer, we have challenges attracting a more diverse faculty, and they receive only 2 to 3% of their submissions for class proposals from people of color. And he was asking, how can he find teachers to solicit proposals? And so I was going to start with Carrie on this one, because Carrie and I have actually had this conversation.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And we were, faced with that same challenge only because we had not done enough work, in my opinion, and quite frankly, to reach outside of our circles to look for those who were not already included in the circle. So we had to expand our circles. We were very fortunate in that there's a lovely woman, Jeanette Sloan, who is on our Diversity Advisory Council, who has created and runs a database called BIPOC in Fiber. So we worked in conjunction with her to expand our list of people whom we were reaching out to. But also, just as we expanded our circle and got to know more and more people, We looked for references, and we did an immense amount of research on social media. Erica, as you said, like, hello, you don't realize that there's people out there in the industry who are not white now. Like, it's a matter of, it's out there. You got to do the work, and you got to look, and you got to find it, and you got to start having conversations. And it's okay to say, like, we need help, and I think too many people are afraid to ask for help. And also, it's okay to post on your social media channels and say, we are looking for talent, and we are looking to diversify our base of teachers. So I think too many of us are afraid to publicly admit that, that we don't know. And sometimes in order to grow, you have to be willing to admit that you don't know and you need help. And so I think that's part of it.
Okay. Erica, would you like to add anything on to that answer as far as where to find teachers?
Just kind of put out a request. There are a lot of people that may not necessarily be established teachers, but they are willing to teach, because so many people teach quick tutorials on Instagram lives. They post videos, they're on YouTube, and there are so many people that would love to get their foot in the door of doing something like that. So just ask.
Yeah.
And Amy and Erica, if I can just add to that, I think as well, we learned that many people of color have not had the opportunity to teach. So Sara, based on something you said earlier, people of color may not have the same resume as white people, but it's just because they have not been given the opportunity. So people just need to be given the opportunity. So I think that's part of it as well.
Okay.
If I could add anything, Amy, I would just add, like, give an invitation. Like, you can look, and then when people tag people that they're into, sometimes it's just that confidence of, like, I've never done it. I don't, like, no one wants to be rejected. Like, I can't tell you how many people, like, like QuiltCon rejects is a hashtag. The fact that it's a hashtag means there's a lot of people that get rejected, and that's okay. Not everything's going to get a yes, but when looking to, like, diversify, instead of just saying, we're here, we want more diversity, you guys should come to us, tap in. Black Makers Matter has a huge Instagram. When people get tagged of, like, talented makers, have someone on your team send an invite. Hey, we've seen your Instagram feed. We love your technique of improv or flying geese or whatever the heck you see on their page. We'd love for you to, consider applying to, teach it. Like, an email invite will make someone, like, that entryway of, like, now they have a relationship with someone there. That can mean the world to someone who might not have had the confidence in the first place, to like, oh, I'm going to submit. Because again, having the resume, having the luxury of time, all those things, even the luxury of applying, the amount of people like, oh, I've applied to 20 quilt shows this year, I don't have time. That's like 20 quilt show entry fees times 20. Like, those are all things that, you have to consider. And so I think a lot of people aren't as industry submerged as those who have the privilege to want to build that brand. So there's a lot of people who are like, I'm in the sewing world, but I'm not really industry involved. And so that means they do it for their own, enjoyment and fun. But if given the opportunity to teach, if invited, they'd love to. But are they actively seeking out those opportunities? They might not be. So I think, when people give you references, don't just say, well, let's put it on Instagram. Like, again, put it on Instagram, do that. But then the second part of that follow-up, like the actionable, send the request, here's an opportunity. Would you like to do it? If you have any questions, let us know. Like those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's all really good advice. And yeah, Carrie and I had this conversation probably almost a month ago, and she said, go find them. And I said, thank you, Carrie. I will do just that. And I did. I started doing a lot of outreach for our organization because we know it's an issue for us as well. So we've definitely done that. So I'm going to start with you this time, Erica. What would you say is the biggest hurdle we need to overcome in the quilting, sewing, knitting industry?
For me, it's the gatekeeping. I think that a lot of the times there are certain people that are always picked, and they may check off that diversity box for a lot of companies and a lot of brands, and those particular people are seen as like the crafting gurus, when there are other people, a lot of talented other people too that are out there, and those people become kind of the gatekeepers. It's like if a particular company or brand is looking to work with somebody, they will actually take the steps into reaching out to those people. And then those people become the gatekeepers, and they get to decide who, if they have a particular personal relationship with another crafter, they'll like put them on. And that's something that needs to be kind of dismantled. And that's just my opinion on that one.
That's great. That's great. And what about you, Sarah? What do you think is the biggest hurdle to overcome?
You know, honestly, I'd say really access. No, I think particularly speaking from like, you know, young, I'm 26 now, not that young, but I think
You're
like
young, Sarah.
in terms of thinking of access, like there's so many, like I can't tell you firsthand how many young people I've worked with that like have the talent to become the next Visa Butler, like hands down. And I think mentorship is one of the biggest hurdles. I think often there's so many, and I say grandmas, not literally, but like there are little grandmas and moms who have all this talent and like they'll make stuff for their kids, they'll put it on Instagram, but they're really not even mentoring anyone. And not to say like force mentorship, but I think oftentimes I got a lot of mentorship as a young person because my parents could afford to pay someone to mentor me. So I think when we think of like almost in gatekeeping, but not gatekeeping in terms of specific, like in an industry way, but gatekeeping in terms of knowledge and resources and really tooling up people. Because I think if we say only those who are going to have access, like Erica, you're self-taught, like that's like amazing that you're smart enough to navigate YouTube and books and have the resourcefulness, more importantly, the like follow through and the ambition to like, you know, not get discouraged. But I think often we're thinking of young people as bringing in, you know, the next generation into sewing. We've got to really work with like teaching the industry of like, you can have all the talent, you can offer this to your grandkids, but also do they have any friends, even the next door neighbor that, you know, obviously couldn't afford it, but like really like that African proverb of like, go get water and then, you know, bring some back to the community. I think like that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think as an industry, oftentimes it's me, my Instagram, my this, my that. And I think like as it's like individually, like our thought process, if we think we've got to go far, we've got to go together, you know, everyone should be able to say that like Amy's mentoring me, like all, like a lot of the people in my network, who are you mentoring? If someone asks them, oh, I'm not mentoring anyone, I'm focused on myself. Like I understand that. And if you don't have the privilege and time to do so, understandable, but I think there should be a lot more mentors in the community. There should, I mean, I think ideally, like if we could compile a group of young people who want to learn sewing and have like a national network of like people who mentor in fashion, people who mentor. And I mean, like kind of like at the opportunity of like, I can just donate a few hours a week. It's like sometimes people can donate their own embroidery skills. Sometimes people can donate materials, but like there's so many young people who just don't have, you know, a mentor. And so I think really as an industry standard, if we could think of like mentorship is just as valuable as donating or making your own art, because someone you tool up behind you, you know, like it's like the knowledge can't die when, you know, grandmas stop sewing. And I say grandma, like literally like, you know, 80 plus, like when they stop sewing, you know, it can't end there. So it's like, it's really, I think a hurdle we need to, you know, overcome is really a bigger sense of fostering a sense of collectivity instead of individuality, instead of like me, my brand, my. It's like, you know, by all means, you can do both. No one's saying only focus on us, but you can simultaneously focus on yourself and developing your own brand while also bringing a few people, you know, up behind you. And I think that as an industry, if we can do that and foster a share of like, if I don't have all these scraps, I know people who are like, the amount of people who like passed away and donated their entire sewing studio to us. I'm like, you had an entire quilt shop in your garage. Like, you know, like you had so much. And it's like the fact that you weren't even able to use all that. I mean, obviously speaks to the socioeconomic privilege you had in hoarding all of that. But that aside, you know, imagine if you would have just been, you know, teaching young people as you know, sewed. And it's like, even if it's with FaceTime, with Zoom, you know, there's so many easy, accessible options. I think, you know, really bringing someone up behind you, I think as an industry, if we could all, you know, foster like, who else am I helping? That would push the needle, you know, really further in the right direction.
I like that. And how about you, Carrie? What do you think is the biggest hurdle?
I'm just absorbing everything that was just said. It's such amazing things. I was just thinking, Sarah, about what you said kind of in relation to all of that. And I guess I'm segueing. I'm not exactly answering the question, Amy, but we certainly as an organization have been able to really kind of switch our business model very quickly from live, as you had mentioned, to virtual. And I think that has opened up so much in terms of access, both from a socioeconomic status standpoint, and from just for whatever reason, people who didn't want to travel to our live events. And there's so much therefore, Sara, that can be done from that perspective. I'm, agreeing with you. The world has now become accustomed to Zoom, as we are all on now. And there's ways to expand the business and connectivity from that perspective. And I think to answer your question, the biggest challenge I see is it's about growth, and it's about just continuing to make sure that we are stepping back, listening, and really continuing to question what we're doing, and to ensure that, Sara and Erica, as both of you mentioned, really that we're all supporting one another and growing together as an industry, because together we will become stronger. And, as I said earlier, there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's been like heartwarmingly beautiful to see the transitions that we've made as a company. Embarrassingly, I will admit this, that in 2019, in our Vogue Knitting Live show in New York, we have about 10,000 attendees who come and take over the Marriott Marquis. We had one Black instructor amongst 50. Embarrassing, strictly just embarrassing. The next show, a year later, that same Black instructor stood up and she cried because she looked around the room and she just couldn't believe what we had done together to diversify our teachers, who are inspiring an entire audience. And it's because we sat back, we worked with a lot of people, we expanded our network, we had really, really hard conversations. I cried a lot. I'm a white privileged woman, so sometimes these are very hard conversations for me to have, and they're vulnerable and they're scary. I don't know if I'm going to say the right thing or the wrong thing, or sometimes I do say the wrong thing, probably. But I'm just real, and I'm just coming to, and I'm coming to the conversation with the right intention always. And so I just think we have to allow ourselves to be afraid, to step up onto the ledge, to be vulnerable, and to continue to grow and learn from one another, because there's so much to offer one another. So
thank you. I think those are all real good examples. I did get one question, Carrie, for you. Someone was asking more about the diversity advisory council that you have. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy and honored to. So the Diversity Advisory Council was founded, and it was kind of an organic growth. We had worked with a few people individually, and it's been a year and a half that they've been working with us now. So I don't remember all of the details of how we all came together, but we hired Cecilia Nelson-Hurt, who's the head of diversity and advisory and inclusion at L'Oreal. And then we also spoke to a gentleman named Louis Boria, and he of Brooklyn Boy Knits, and he came on board. And then everyone voted on the other 6 members to come on board. So we have designers, we have teachers, we have business owners, and we meet once a month. They are paid to be on the panel, and or the council, excuse me. And together we just work as an organization to look at what, we have very specific targeted goals that we want to reach and work towards. And sometimes, there are incidences that arise, whether or not they be, things that are happening on social media or the industry in general, where we're putting out fires. But for the most part, we're really working collectively to look at what our goals are to, to improve what we're doing. So.
Okay.
I don't know
All
if
right,
that
thank you.
I don't know if that answers the
It-
questions.
I
But
think it did. So you have a paid advisory council. There's 8 people on it, and they come from all the different sort of functions within your industry.
yes, exactly. And
Perfect.
3 of the members are from the UK and the rest are from the United States.
Nice, nice. And I think that that's something that any business could do, whether it was a larger, like a manufacturing company that produces goods, or also even at the store level, is to create some sort of a structure to increase diversity by starting those difficult conversations. So I think that
Yeah.
that's really wonderful. And I'm going to echo your sentiments about saying, not sure if you're saying the right thing, because I know when I'm on calls with Sara and her partner Lauren, her co-chair, I'll say something and I'm like, I'm probably saying it wrong, or I don't know what I'm saying. And if I'm offending you, please tell me. And they're great. And I've learned as much from them as they've probably learned from me, just because they're sharing a language around social justice that I was not aware of. And it's been a great experience for me just to get to work with both of them. It's something I look forward to every 2 weeks when we meet. But so if we are wrapping up pretty quickly, if there was a piece of advice that you could give to shops, because that's really where so I think it starts from organizations that share media and include designers, but it also, you need to feel like shops are diverse and welcoming. And so I'm going to start with you this time, Sara, and then I want to leave it open to questions the last 5 minutes. What would you say? How could a shop create that space where you want to go in? What would that look like to you?
I'd first start like, perhaps super like the easiest things and then get to the harder work. So I'd say the easiest things: add a rainbow flag, add a Black Lives Matter sign in your window, like really performative things that, yeah, it's performative activism, but more importantly, it knows that, okay, at least the intention is there. So when I walk in, I'm going to actually expect like, the work to have been done. So like, for example, in terms of, maybe who's hired, maybe who's staff, maybe what's offered, maybe in terms of, even fabric selection. Like I can't tell you how many shops I've been to, and the only type of Black fabrics they might have are like slavery looking ones, like civil rights reproduction fabrics. So I think in terms of content there, type of, like even in garments, going to size things like, oh, we're making a pattern, small, medium, large, like that's it. I think in terms of, more than that, I think, like if there is a, advisory council or any intentional space that you're creating to really and I think more importantly, you can be honest with those who shop there. If you only have a few makers of color that come to your shop, talk to them. Hey, what can we do? Like ask. I think sometimes there's simple things, and I think oftentimes people don't realize one bad interaction can spread really quickly. So it's like, I think people don't realize, like, I'll go into a shop, like I'm ready to cut. Maybe not now as much, but when I was like younger in high school, where's your mom? Are you going to be able to afford this? Like I'd be asked that explicitly, by shop owners. And it's like, my mom gave me her card, but if you'd like her to come in, she could, like little things of like, I really think, encouraging, if we've been to like, I've brought like 20 plus kids to a shop. Not only the shop staff was really nice, but the clientele of all the quilters were so annoyed that there's 20 high schoolers in there. And I think like reflecting on the industry, yes, there's 20 high schoolers in there, but guess what? They were excited. And at the end of the day, the future of the industry is often in the young people that we're cultivating to like get a love for it. So it can't be, as a shop owner, you can't control your clientele, but I think really like as an industry in general, if we focus on the young encouragement, and we focus on mentorship, and we focus on highlighting first-time makers, and even if their PJ pants are sewn completely, off, and they're or they're biased, or even if their quilt, if their 9 patches don't match, guess what? It's okay. Don't berate young people with, the seam ripper, and don't always have such rigidity and focus on 1/4-inch seams. I think if we can really just cultivate the love for creating, and then we can focus on cleaning up perhaps later if they want to focus on the technique. I think really, our teaching style can influence a lot. And obviously we want to teach it the right way, but if someone's making a mistake and they're still having fun, sometimes just give them the space to let them create. I think those type of, like, I think in theory, like just interaction concepts and shopping concepts, even if someone is young, don't just perhaps brush them off with, oh, there won't be a big sale compared to, someone who, is an established culture. But I really think, stereotype biases play out a lot in how people are treated. Like, I can't tell you, like, I'll walk in there, oh, give us your backpack. What am I going to steal in a quilt shop? Or like, even the fact that I'm asked for my backpack, you're not asking all these other women for their purses. Like, those type of things matter. And so when you get those experiences, not only does it hurt your feelings, but it really makes you not want to come back.
Right, right. How about you, Erica? What advice would you give, to the quilt shop or the fabric shop where you go to get your garment fabric?
Basically, the same things that Sara said. For like the independent shops and everything. I mean, there's literally no reason why an independent store owner can't have like a rainbow flag or a Black Lives Matter display or something to make people feel welcome. Like when you're dealing with like the largest stores like Joann and everything, I'm pretty sure that's like a process to go through. But indies, yeah, I mean, come on. And the same things with these sewing machine dealers, just to cultivate a welcoming atmosphere. And you can't look at a customer and judge their buying power, because you just never know. And just be open. I mean, even if someone is coming in and they're asking like, how much is this machine or whatever, I mean, like, and if they like kind of recoil at the price or whatever, like show them other options, like, hey, well, here's a refurbished machine, or we're going to have a sale, or this machine right here is a little less than the one that you were looking for. It has the same features, it's just something, just work with them and be welcoming. And I think that's the thing. It's like when you walk into a store and like, how you go in and you're not greeted, or like you can kind of tell when like you go in and somebody's like, oh, they're not going to buy anything. You get that vibe when you get in there, and you recognize that. And that's just something that store owners need to work on. And like the retailers that sell for the sewing machine companies, like the ones that are like Howells and like a Joann or whatever, that's a whole different experience too in and of itself though, like because a lot of them are positioned like right by the cutting tables. Like sometimes you just want to step over and look at a machine. Like I'm a Janome girl, but I was looking at the Husqvarnas that were in my Joann store, and I was just looking at them, and she was like, oh, she looked up at me and then she looked back down. She was like, oh, anything you need to see? And it was just that kind of vibe right there. So yeah, just a lot of more training from like the big companies and everything that can afford all of the diversity training, and just to cultivate that welcoming environment.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. And Carrie?
Yeah, just adding to what Erica said in regards to that, I think just acknowledging everyone equally when they walk into a store is vital. Making everyone feel welcome and invited to explore and not watched over, but making sure that people are aware that you're there to answer their questions. I think also, again, no matter where you are at this point in time with the technology that we have, there's capability in, educational formats to bring, screens into stores. So even if you're not in a super diverse area, it's certainly you're able to bring talent in for lectures and classes. And I think, it's important for people to be having these conversations all over the place. And so, doing a sew and sip and chat on some of these, or knit and sip and chat, or whatever it is, on some of these important conversations are it's okay to bring those conversations to your local stores. So I think acknowledgement, support, and bringing different faces into the environment is important. And there's ways that we can all do that now, no matter where we live. So
I agree. And on a a manufacturer scale, one of the things that I was thinking about, and I know that Sarah's had this, is manufacturers that want to support nonprofits. I know Sarah's gotten some really good support, but I think also the opportunity to volunteer for nonprofits is a way that organizations can help create awareness and become more inclusive and more diverse, is just educating their workforce, because I think that's a big part of it as well, is making sure that the people who work in the industry are educating themselves, and that their employers are taking the time to provide that education. I think that's really important, something that we can do at any level in business. From being an independent store owner to running Genomi or a large fabric company, whatever it is. I think, teaching and educating and making the effort is the first step. I'm going to open it up real quick. Does anyone in our audience have any questions? We have just a couple minutes left before we thank these amazing women for participating in this call today. I'm wondering if anyone is typing. We'll see in just a minute. Do any of you have any last thoughts, any questions that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you? Any burning ideas that you wanted to share that we didn't get a chance to do? I'm getting thinking. Okay, I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Oh, wait, I just got, Sara, can you talk about the SJSA mentorship program? I think you muted yourself.
I have roommates. So we have a SJSA business incubator program that basically Genomi, Spoonflower, and we had a few other people just really helped. What we did is we had a really lot of young kids that, because all our workshops, we were scheduled to go into so many high schools, COVID hit, we're like, hey, we no longer can do it. It took us a few months to get adapted to Zoom. More importantly, shipping all the materials, scissors, glue, it makes our cost of workshops skyrocket. So it's kids were really, particularly for our summer program, we had a lot of kids that had committed to doing something. And so, thinking about really what helped start SJSA and everything else is there's adults who believed in me. And not only did they believe in me, they gave me the resources, free resources to here's some money, do what you want with it, and really the accountability of let me see what you did with it, but really that helped kickstart SJSA. So I was right now during COVID, so many kids have ideas, whether they're creative, whether they're entrepreneur, just things in general they want to do, whether it's helping the homeless, whether it's giving women in jail pads and tampons and hygiene, feminine hygiene stuff. So we came up with this SJSA business incubator, particularly inspired by Abby's Craft Industry Alliance. And really, we got all these mentors. So we have kids that have been in the program. We have over 40 kids, and they each got a mentor. So they were assigned a mentor, and that mentor checked in with them basically 1 hour a week. And that was for their own idea, their own thing. Then we had spokespersons that would come every other Saturday. We had a workshop. So every other Saturday we have someone lecture. One person would give a lecture on obtaining an EIN or starting an LLC. One person would give a lecture on starting a website. One person would give industry leaders who came and they just shared their expertise. We had everyone from Genomi, Latifah. We had all sorts of people. Lauren, the executive director of SJSA, my 25-year-old friend, she's, kind of ran the program, but really all the kids got $1,000. They got it in 3 stipends. And so with that money, some kids bought sewing machines, some kids bought, fabric or fusible or a website domain or clay or whatever kind of thing they wanted to really get their business jump started, help with social media pages. We connected them with logo designers through SJSA's network of helping them to craft and create a logo. So really it was about giving them money, mentorship, but most importantly, encouragement, support, and the consistency of having someone in their corner and listen. I think a quote that was really the inspiration for starting SJSA is there's no such thing as the silent, only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. And so there's really kids have things they want to say. And I say kids, they're high school, they're not 5. But young people have things they want to say. Young people have things they want to do. It's really just all the adults in the room. Do they validate their idea? Do they care? And if not, I think a lot of kids have been told, you can do that when you're older. My mom, you know, my mom's twin is a like PhD professor, like Brown or Yale or something. And she was like, you know, you have to get a PhD to write a book. You have to be someone before, you know, you can, you know, be like, you can't write a book before you are someone. And then I was like, I wrote a book at 13. Obviously, you know, that's a lot of the intersection of my privilege, my identity, and obviously Amy, you know, believing in a 13-year-old. But really, you don't have to have a PhD to write a book, and you don't have to, you can self-publish, you can do Amazon, and you don't have to be an expert at something before you can share and like, you know, give back and do to others. So really the incubator, it wrapped up. All the kids at this point have got their $1,000. They're submitting receipts on what they've spent, but more importantly, their relationships with their mentor, for the most part, have superseded past the like volunteer commitment of the mentors in the program. And I think going back to that, having adults who care about young people and not just their grandkids or their own son and daughters, like I think that really, like that spark alone, and those relationships alone that have been cultivated, you know, are really transcending, you know, beyond that force space.
Thank you. And then Erica, we got a question for you. What impact has the Black Makers Matter had on exposure for the makers?
On Mondays, we like to highlight Maker Mondays, where we highlight people that submit like an application process, not really an application, but just kind of their high points and pictures and just kind of tell what they do. And we post about 3 to 4 every Monday, and just people around the community, not just sewers, but people that do a little bit of everything. On Thursdays, we do like a Throwback Thursday, where we do like some type of historical figure to show that, you know, people of color have always been creating and making. And on Fridays, we like to show like kids that are venturing out, like creating businesses and making things. Sometimes, you know, we just kind of see people highlighted in the community, maybe like someone that has been like shown on like a news show or whatever, and we reach out to them and we interview them, and we also highlight them. So that's been a great way to just expose people. Like I've met people that I didn't know who did interesting things though, like a lot of interior designers, a lot of beauty product makers, soap makers, candle makers. And it's just been like really interesting, especially the historical aspect of it.
I bet. That sounds wonderful. That sounds so cool. I think that's all the questions we have, and we are officially 2 minutes over time. So I wanted to thank the three of you so much for being on this panel and for participating and being so open and honest with your answers. It was just delightful to get to chat with all of you, and hopefully we'll get to do it again. So thank you all so much. Thank you all who attended. We really appreciate you coming and participating in our first panel for the Strategic Sewing and Quilting Summit. So thank you all so much. Have a lovely rest of your week, and I will talk to you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.